Did you know that there are 7 elements to myths? Most myths have at least one, but usually more combinations of these elements. The first is that they usually tell us stories about the gods. Or, number 2, heroes who were descended from gods. Myths often tell of some extraordinary events. Usually these events happened in a specific place that people could see, but at an unspecified time, usually way back in the past. In the myths, gods led lives that are very separate and different from the ordinary lives of mortals. Often mortals have to fulfill a destiny that cannot be avoided, similar to Luke Skywalker in Star Wars or Harry Potter in the Hogwarts stories. The bottom line is that myths reflect Greek culture in the same way the modern-day stories are a reflection of modern-day culture. So it is possible for us to learn a lot about the ancient Greeks just from their myths. Likewise, if someone from the future was to watch some of our movies, they would learn a lot about our modern-day values and culture also. If we can understand Greek mythology, then we can understand Greek religion too. You might probably have worked out by now that the ancient Greeks were polytheistic. That means that they worshipped, yes, you've guessed it, many gods. These gods all lived on Mount Olympus, the largest mountain in Greece. Well, all apart from Hades, who lived in the land of the dead, also known as Hades. Now sometimes it was possible for gods to take a human form. They could eat, sleep, feel pain, marry, have children, intervene in human affairs and cause no end of problems for people. And like humans, they were flawed. They had emotions like jealousy, vanity, greed, lust and rage. In effect, the gods were superhuman, and they had superhuman egos and emotions to match. In ancient Greece, Zeus was the king of the gods. His wife was Hera. Zeus and Hera were always arguing, a bit like a real husband and wife. Apollo was the sun god, Artemis was the god of the hunt, whilst Athena was the goddess of wisdom and war. Aphrodite, on the other hand, was the goddess of love. Do you think these gods and goddesses were similar or different to those of the ancient Egyptians?
I have to make a family tree of the Greek gods for my history class. It's all pretty complicated. Dear Tim and Moby, who were the Greek gods? From Theodore. The ancient Greeks were polytheistic. That means they believed in more than one god. They had a whole mythology that explained their gods' roles in the universe. The story goes that 3 brothers, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, gambled for control of the heavens, sea, and underworld. Poseidon won the sea, Hades won the underworld, and Zeus won the heavens. The gods agreed that they would share control of the earth, which led to a lot of arguments and fighting. Yeah, according to legend, the 12 main Greek gods lived on top of Mount Olympus. They were known as the Olympians. But Mount Olympus wasn't always a very friendly place to live. Let's take a look at some of the major players on Mount Olympus. Since he controlled the heavens, Zeus became the ruler of the other Greek gods. Hera was his wife, and they didn't have the greatest relationship. Hera was jealous at Zeus's interest in other women. Yeah. Then there was Apollo, the god of medicine, music, and the sun. His sister was Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. Artemis and Apollo were actually the children of Zeus and a mortal woman, Leto. Aphrodite was the goddess of love. She was married to Hephaestus, the god of metalworking, but she was actually in love with Ares, the god of war. I know, it's like staying home from school and watching soap operas. Demeter was Zeus's sister and the goddess of grain and the harvest. Athena was the goddess of justice and learning. She was born fully grown from Zeus's head. As the ruler of the sea, Poseidon controlled the wind and the waves. When he got angry, rough seas were sure to follow. Hermes was another of Zeus's sons, and he was a messenger of the gods. He had the job of conducting souls to the underworld, ruled by Hades, as you remember. Hades wasn't very happy about getting stuck with the underworld, and he stayed away from Mount Olympus most of the time. Well, the whole thing sounds complicated, but the gods were a part of everyday life for the ancient Greeks. A sick person might ask Apollo, the god of medicine, to make them well again. Sailors would make sacrifices to Poseidon to keep storms away. The Greeks made animal sacrifices to the gods before going to war, before sporting events, to show their thanks, or to find out the future. Oh, and by the way, there were lots of other minor gods and goddesses who ruled over all sorts of other things on Earth. It was a pretty big family. Well, the Greek gods didn't really go anywhere. People just stopped believing in them eventually and decided to believe in other stuff. You want to have control of the seas? Okay, go for it. What are you doing in there?
There were some important institutions that were important to the ancient Greek religion. At Delphi, there was an oracle. This was a woman, a prophetess who would speak for the god Apollo. The Greeks believed that it was possible to ask for advice from Apollo by asking her. The Olympic Games was an important religious institution also. These games were considered sacred and lasted for a month. They were held in honor of the god, Zeus. Did you know that each city had a god or goddess dedicated to it? They believed that their chosen god would intervene and help them in times of trouble. In the next video, you will hear about 3 myths. The myth of Daedalus, the story of Pandora's box, and the tale of Jason and the golden fleece. Each myth teaches us a lesson. Can you work out what each lesson is?
Our story begins thousands of years ago, south of Greece, on the island of Crete. It was there that one could find a huge labyrinth that covered several acres. The structure was designed and built by Daedalus, the ancient world's most noted engineer.